Now, still on the same story, former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has been dealt a major political and legal blow after the High Court upheld his impeachment, effectively confirming his removal from office. The court ruled that while his right to a fair hearing was violated during the process, the impeachment itself remains valid, leaving his removal in office and marking the end of his tenure as Deputy President.
The key grounds of judgment included jurisdiction, predetermination and bias, public participation, constitutionality and legality, composition of the National Assembly and IEBC, as well as constitutional processes. On jurisdiction, the three-judge bench of the High Court upheld impeachment of Gachagua, confirming that he was properly impeached. The court has upheld its jurisdiction to hear and determine former DP Rigathi Gachagua's impeachment case, reaffirming that Parliament is not supreme.
The Senate vote under Section 33, subsection 7 of the County Act is susceptible to challenge. Courts may proceed to stay and quash a resolution to remove a governor, and even halt the filling in of the vacancy. But such judicial interventions cannot be imagined in the case of a president or the deputy president.
The three-judge bench of the High Court found no evidence to support claims that legislators or the speakers were biased in the impeachment proceedings against former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. The court held that the allegations of bias and conflict of interest were unsubstantiated and lacked a sufficient factual basis.
Impeachment proceedings challenged herein are justiciable. This court possesses jurisdiction under Articles 22, 23, and 165 of the Constitution to determine whether the National Assembly and the Senate acted within constitutional bounds, complied with constitutional procedures, respected constitutional rights, and remained faithful to the constitutional safeguards governing the impeachment of a deputy president.
The three-judge bench of the High Court, on grounds of adequate facilitation, argued that Parliament conducted sufficient public participation before the impeachment of former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, and that minimal errors do not disqualify the process. They exonerated Senate from the business of conducting public participation.
Public participation is therefore not a gift of the state to the citizen, but a constitutional right that the state is obligated to facilitate, to protect, and to give full effect to.
The judges gave a clean bill of health to the nomination and approval of Kithure Kindiki as DP, saying there was no solid requirement for public participation on the same. On constitutionality and legality, the court says there was nothing unconstitutional in Parliament invoking standing orders based on their capability and financial muscle to attend to the matter within the parliamentary timelines. However, highlighting a deficiency in Article 150 of the Constitution, calling on Parliament to enact statutory framework on removal of Deputy President. On composition of National Assembly and IEBC, the three-judge High Court bench holds the question of whether the National Assembly was properly constituted during Gachagua's impeachment proceedings is premature for determination at this stage. It holds that IEBC was constitutionally incapacitated at the material time, but the absence of commissioners does not incapacitate the Secretariat from discharging, among them administrative matters, for institutional continuity. On constitutional validity, the court stands that the constitutional parameters of the above matter were at par with the need for expedition for purposes of continuity and stability, being a high-stakes case.
This violation constitutes both a vindication of his rights and a recognition of the constitutional infirmity in the process, but does not undo the impeachment itself, given the finality of Article 145, sub-Article 7, and the constitutional absurdity that would arise from dual incumbency.
When they say that there was no modification of the procedures in the Senate, they recommend for legislation. That's what I've told them. We never came here for recommendations on legislations.
And when you have not been given a right to be heard, that's a very cardinal issue. And therefore, my position is that, it should have been annulled.
Then standing order says there was no motion to debate. Honorable Mutuse knows that. He did not address that in my case. None of the people addressed that in my case. So the question is now, did the Speaker of the National Assembly know? Yes. Did these judges know? Yes. Why is it they have avoided consistently this particular petition?
Under Article 157 of the Constitution, an impeachment is final. It is a final process. And that is why, though the court found that Senate ought to have accorded Rigathi Gachagua an adjournment, it has not faulted the impeachment. The impeachment is final.
As to whether the former deputy president was accorded a fair trial process, the court established that the Senate erred in not allowing Rigathi the constitutional right to represent himself while they had capacity to grant adjournment amounting to a possibility of miscarriage of justice. The court has, however, gone ahead to uphold the impeachment. For TV 47, I'm Linda Alela.